Hi, you guys. We are working on 6.3. We're going to learn a couple different ways to solve percents. The first one I want you guys to know is the percent proportion. So we're used to looking at things in terms of part and whole. So if I said you had 3/4 of a pizza or 3/4 of a pizza, you would know that it was split into four pieces. So the whole pizza would have four pieces, and you get three of them. Okay, so you get 3/4 of that pizza, which is a good thing. That's a whole lot of pizza, right? Now, in order to solve it as a proportion, we would have to know that our percent can be written as a fraction, some number over 100, right? And so we can just call this top our p. This would be our percent. So you might say if you had 3/4 of a pizza, you had 75%. Okay, do you see how that works? So we could remove that and say we have 75%. Because if you think about it in terms of money, if you had 3/4, you would have 75 cents, right? So some of these percents are going to be pretty easy because we're used to dealing with them with money. But let's look at a different example where maybe you know part of this, but you don't know all of it. So here's a question. What percent of 15 is 12? So you have to ask yourself, what's our whole? Okay, what percent of 15 is 12? So we know part, we know the whole, and we don't know the percent. But we do know in fraction form it would be over 100. So we're looking for that percent. And you might say, hey, this is good because we know how to solve a proportion. We can use our cross product strategy and we could say our percent is going to be x. Let's just add it as x, or you know what? Let's even call it just p so that we remember it's percent. So we would have 12 times 100 is equal to 15p. Okay? And then in order to solve this, we are going to divide both sides by 15, and that will give us just our percentage, right? So here we go. We would have 1200, because 12 times 100 is that, divided by 15 equals p. Now, if you need to rewrite this in traditional division form to solve that, that is a-okay. Another thing you might think is, my goodness, oh, never mind. You could factor out 15, but that's the same as dividing 1200 by 15. And when you do that, we would say 15 goes into 120. Let me see. You might think 15 times 2 is 30. 30 would go into 124 times, so that would be about 8. So 8 times 15 is going to give us 120, which subtracts out to 0, then 15 goes into 0 times. So we know our p, 80, is equal to p. So our percentage, back to our original problem, what percent of 15 is 12? It would be 80%. Now, using this percent proportion is pretty easy as long as you can keep track of what parts you know and what parts you're having to solve for. So let's try another one. What number is 36% of 50? Okay, so we know our percent would be 36 over 100. It's given us that. And what number is 36% of 50? So do we know the whole? We do. The whole is 50, and some number is going to be 36% of 50. Okay, so we have our proportion set up, and we can solve this now. So we're going to say 50 times 36 equals 100 times x, using our cross product strategy, okay? So to solve for that number, we would divide both sides by 100 as well, and this crosses out, and we're just going to be solving for x. So let's go ahead and set this up. Now, guys, I'm going to teach you a shortcut for actually solving multiplication problems like this. You can rewrite this top part, factoring out 2 from this 36 so that we end up with 100 on top. So if we rewrote it as 50 times 2 times 18 over 100 equals x, you would say, I know 50 times 2 is 100, and 100 divided by 100 is just 1. So you would say 18 equals x. And then you are going to double check that and say, all right, if I go back to my original equation, would that make sense? Is 18 less than half? Sure, it is. So that would make sense. So your number is 18. Okay, now what about if you have a percent that is greater than 100? What's that going to look like? If you're finding 150% of what number is 24, set up your percent side. 150 over 100 is 100%. And it's asking you 150% of what number? So we don't know the whole, but we do know that 150% of that number is going to be 24. So as long as you can break down the question and know which parts you have and which parts you're solving for, you're going to be A-okay. So cross products again, we have 24 times 100 equals 150x. Divide both sides by 150, and we're solving just for x. Okay, we're going to play with a shortcut again because if you guys can figure out how to factor the top just a little bit and factor the bottom just a little bit, you're going to be able to divide a lot easier. So if you think about it, 150 would be 50 times 3. So if we say 24 is 8 times 3 and 100 is 50 times 2, all of a sudden, you're going to see that we have this lovely 3 times 50 is 150. Now, if you have the 150 on the top and on the bottom, you can factor it out, okay? So we are going to be left with just 8 times 2 on the top because our 150 and 150 is going to factor out and just leave us with 1 and 1. So 8 times 2 would be 16, and that would be equal to x. And we're going to put it back up in our original proportion and see if that makes sense. 150 is bigger than 100, right? 24 is bigger than 16. And if we were to put this in simplest form, we would have 3 over 2. And if we were to put this in simplest form, we would have 3 over 2. If we divide the top by 8 and the bottom by 8, you would see that they are equal in simplest form. So we have solved for our x here using the percent proportion. Now, if this part is messing you up, you can just crunch the numbers and you could say 2,400 divided by 150 if you wanted to do that. But if you know that you can break it down into factors and then reduce by factoring out a common factor from the top and the bottom, it does save you steps.